The envelope sat on my kitchen counter like a ticking bomb. Heavy cream paper, expensive to the touch, with my name written in Tom's precise handwriting. Inside, a single key and a note that read, "A fresh start for our family. Meet me at 42 Maple Grove at 6 p.m. I'm Iris, and until that moment, I thought I knew what my life was about. Success at 35, a beautiful 3-year-old son, and a marriage that I believed was built on mutual respect and understanding. Funny how a single piece of paper can shatter everything you thought you knew. "Mommy, can I have juice?" Eli tugged at my sleeve, his dark curls falling into his eyes. I reached for the orange juice automatically, my mind still fixed on that damn envelope. "Of course, baby." My hands shook slightly as I poured. "Want to go on an adventure with Mommy later?" He nodded enthusiastically, spilling drops of juice on his dinosaur t-shirt. I checked my watch, 4:30 p.m. The nanny would be here soon for Eli's evening routine. My phone buzzed. A message from Rachel, my sister-in-law, so excited about the big surprise. Mom and Dad can't wait either. My stomach clenched. Of course they knew before me. They always knew everything before me. I drove to Maple Grove with mounting dread, each turn bringing me closer to whatever Tom had planned without my knowledge or consent. The street was lined with identical duplexes, all wearing the same beige facade like masks at a masquerade ball. Number 42 stood out immediately, not because it was different, but because of the cluster of people standing in front of it. Tom, beaming like he'd just won the lottery. Nancy, his mother, wearing that smug smile I'd grown to despise. George, his father, already holding a beer. And Rachel, practically bouncing with barely contained glee. "Surprise!" Tom called out as I parked. "I bought us a house." I stepped out of the car, my heels clicking against the concrete. "You bought us a house without telling me?" "Not just any house," Nancy interjected, moving forward to loop her arm through Tom's. "A family home. We'll be living in the other half. Isn't it wonderful? We can all be together." The world tilted sideways for a moment. My perfectly ordered life, my carefully maintained boundaries, my sacred space, all of it crumbling under the weight of this wonderful surprise. "Tom," I managed to say, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me, "can we talk privately for a moment?" But Rachel was already rattling off renovation plans, and George was commenting on property values, and Tom, my husband, who was supposed to be my partner, just stood there grinning like an idiot, completely oblivious to the betrayal written all over my face. In that moment, watching them all celebrate the demolition of my independence, something inside me hardened. They wanted to play happy families? Fine. But they were about to learn that some games have unexpected rules. That night, I sat at our dining room table, mortgage documents spread before me like evidence at a crime scene. Tom paced behind me, his footsteps a metronome of nervous energy. $200,000, Tom. You took out a loan for $200,000 without telling me. It's an investment in our future, he said, stopping to massage my shoulders. I shrugged him off. Mom and Dad are contributing their share. Their share? The laugh that escaped me didn't sound like my own. You mean the money they're borrowing against their retirement? The same retirement they couldn't afford last Christmas when they needed us to pay for their new roof? He dropped into the chair across from me, running his hands through his hair. They've worked it all out. Rachel's helping with the paperwork. Rachel? My fingers tightened around the pen I was holding. Your unemployed sister who lost her real estate license last year is handling the paperwork? A knock at the door interrupted his response. Nancy burst in without waiting for an answer, carrying a casserole dish like it was a peace offering. George and Rachel trailed behind her, already making themselves at home in my kitchen. "We brought dinner," Nancy announced, shooting me a look that dared me to refuse her generosity. "And the paint samples for the new house. I'm thinking sage green for the shared spaces." "There won't be any shared spaces," I said, standing up. "Because we're not moving." The room went silent. Rachel's face flushed red. "But we've already started the renovation plans. Dad hired contractors." "Without consulting us?" I turned to Tom, who suddenly found the floor fascinating. "Sweetheart," George stepped closer, his hand brushing my arm in that way that always made my skin crawl. "Don't be difficult. We're family." "Family?" I stepped back, bumping into the table. "Family doesn't make major financial decisions behind each other's backs." "Family doesn't." "Oh, here we go again," Nancy cut in, her voice dripping with false patience. "Always so dramatic, Iris. This is exactly why we needed to take charge. Tom, darling, tell her about the trust fund we're setting up for Eli." My head snapped toward Tom. "What trust fund?" "It's nothing concrete yet," he stammered. "Just something Mom suggested. For when you go back to work full-time," Rachel added helpfully. "Since you're so career-focused, we thought." "I already work full-time," I said through gritted teeth. "And I'm not leaving my son with his loving grandmother?" Nancy's smile turned sharp. "Better than that teenage babysitter you insist on using." I looked at each of them, Nancy's smug certainty, George's predatory gaze, Rachel's barely concealed glee, and Tom's weak, pleading eyes. They'd planned this all along. Every detail, every decision, carefully orchestrated to trap me in their web of control. "Get out," I whispered. Then louder, "Get out of my house. Now." They left, but their victory lingered in the air like poison. They thought they had won. They had no idea what was coming. The forgery jumped out at me like a neon sign. I stared at Rachel's attempt at my signature on the mortgage documents, my hands trembling with a mixture of rage and vindication. 15 years in marketing had taught me to spot fake authorizations from a mile away, but this was personal. My office door clicked open. "Those files are confidential," Rachel said, her voice tight with panic. She must have noticed them missing from Nancy's desk during their latest family planning session. "Funny thing about confidential documents," I said, not looking up. "They usually require real signatures." She moved closer, perfume heavy in the air between us. "Iris, let me explain." "Explain what?" "How you forged my signature. Or how you falsified my income statements." I spread out the papers, each one a fresh betrayal. "Did Nancy put you up to this, or was this your own special contribution?" "You don't understand," Rachel's voice cracked. "Mom said it was the only way." "You're always so difficult about family matters." I finally looked at her, really looked at her. Designer clothes that still had tags, desperate to project success she didn't have. A sister-in-law playing dress-up in my life. "Tell me about the trust fund," I said. "The one for Eli." Her face paled. "That's different. We're trying to protect him." "From what?" "His mother who works too much. His father who can't stand up to his family." I stood, gathering the documents. "Or maybe from the grandmother who's planning to sue for custody once you all move in next door." Rachel's sharp intake of breath told me I'd hit the mark. "How did you?" "I have friends at the courthouse, Rachel. Friends who actually passed their bar exam." She lunged for the papers, but I was faster. "You'll ruin everything," she hissed. Mom and Dad need this. Tom needs this. Why can't you just? Just what? Let you steal my son? Let George corner me in empty rooms like he did at Christmas? Let Nancy poison my marriage? That's not, George would never, but her eyes slid away from mine, and I saw the truth she couldn't hide. You knew, I whispered. About George. This whole time. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Mom says you provoke him. If you just try harder to fit in. I held up my hand, silencing her. In that moment, something inside me crystallized into diamond-hard resolve. They wanted to play games with my life, my marriage, my child? Fine. But they were about to learn that every game has a winner and a loser. Get out of my office, Rachel, I said quietly. And tell your mother to expect a call from my lawyer. She fled, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and desperate lies. I picked up my phone, fingers hovering over the keypad. Time to call in some favors. The private investigator's photos spread across my desk like playing cards in a losing hand. Each image told its own story: Rachel meeting with custody lawyers, Nancy touring private schools for 3-year-olds. George's offshore account statements. But it was the last photo that made my blood run cold: Tom, signing papers at the bank, dated 3 months ago. My brother Marcus leaned against my office window, his police detective badge catching the afternoon light. You sure you want to go down this road, Iris? Once you start, there's no turning back. I touched the photo of Tom. They're trying to take my son. Then take them down, he said, sliding a USB drive across my desk. Financial records, background checks, everything you need. But remember, people like Nancy, they don't play fair when cornered. My phone buzzed, Tom's message: family dinner tonight. Mom insists. Perfect timing, Marcus said. They're getting cocky. I gathered the photos, but my hands froze over one showing George following a young intern from his old company. How many others? 3 complaints filed. All buried. Marcus's jaw tightened. Nancy's good at making problems disappear. The office door opened, and I quickly swept the photos into a drawer. My assistant Sarah stood there, pale-faced. Mrs. Miller is here. Nancy Miller. Nancy swept in before I could respond, all designer suits and practiced charm. Darling, we need to discuss the house. The contractors are waiting and, she stopped, noticing Marcus. Oh. I wasn't aware you had company. Detective Marcus Chin, my brother said, not correcting her assumption. Just finishing up some business with Mrs. Miller. Nancy's smile flickered. Police business? How fascinating. Nothing serious, I hope? Just routine, I said, watching her eyes dart to my drawer. About protecting what's mine. Family is everything, she agreed, her voice honey-sweet with warning. Speaking of which, Tom mentioned you've been resistant to our plans. Perhaps we should discuss this privately? Nothing to discuss, I stood, matching her smile. I've made my position clear. Have you? She stepped closer, dropping her voice. Because clarity is important, especially when it comes to custody arrangements. Stable home environment, family support system, courts consider all that, you know. My brother's hand touched my shoulder, steadying me. Nancy's threat hung in the air between us, but she'd made a crucial mistake. She'd shown her cards too soon. See you at dinner, I said pleasantly. I'm bringing dessert. After she left, Marcus whistled low. You're really going to serve it cold, aren't you? I picked up the USB drive, feeling its weight in my palm. No, brother. I'm going to serve it burning hot. The flash drive's contents glowed on my laptop screen as I sat in my parked car outside Nancy and George's house. 3 decades of carefully hidden secrets, all preserved in PDFs and spreadsheets. My hands shook as I transferred everything to a tablet, my insurance policy for tonight's dinner. Through the window, I watched them setting the table. Nancy directing traffic like a general, Rachel hovering anxiously, George already working on his second scotch. Tom helping Eli into his booster seat, completely oblivious to the storm about to break. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus, backups in place if needed. Stay sharp. I grabbed the tablet and my homemade tiramisu, the one Nancy always criticized for being too bitter. Tonight, she'd learn about bitter. There's our girl. George called as I entered, his hand landing on my lower back. I stepped away, catching Rachel's guilty glance. Iris, darling, Nancy swooped in, inspecting my dessert. We were just discussing the house. The contractors need decisions about the shared kitchen. Actually, I cut in, setting my tablet on the table, I have something to share first. Tom looked up from helping Eli with his napkin. Can't it wait? Mom made her special roast. Like the special roast last Christmas? I asked quietly. When George cornered me in the pantry, the room went still. Nancy's smile froze, Rachel dropped her fork, and George's face darkened. Iris, Tom started, but I was already opening files on the tablet. Or maybe we should discuss the trust fund first. The one you're funding with money from George's secret account? The same account he used to settle those harassment claims? That's enough. Nancy slammed her hand down. You ungrateful. Mom, Rachel whispered, she knows. Knows what? Tom looked between us, confusion turning to concern. What's going on? I slid the tablet toward him. Everything, Tom. The forged documents, the custody plans, the private school applications, all of it. Your family's been very busy. You're making things up, George growled, reaching for the tablet. I pulled it back. Touch it and Marcus releases everything to the fraud department. He's waiting for my signal. Nancy's face went white. You wouldn't dare. Try me. I stood, my voice steady despite my racing heart. You wanted to play happy families? Fine. But first, let's talk about your definition of family. Let's talk about loyalty and protection and what really happened to Rachel's real estate license. Mommy? Eli's small voice cut through the tension. Why is everyone mad? I looked at my son, then at the people who thought they could take him from me. Nobody's mad, baby. We're just finally being honest. The timer in the kitchen chimed, a hollow sound in the suffocating silence. Nancy's perfect roast was burning, and with it, every illusion of control she'd ever had. Tom stared at the tablet, scrolling through document after document, his face draining of color. This can't be real. Mom? Nancy's mask cracked. Everything I did was for this family. For you. For me? His voice cracked. Forging Iris's signature? Planning to take custody of my son? You were always too weak to see what needed to be done, George interjected, moving toward me. Just like now, letting her destroy this family with her lies. Touch me again, I said, backing away, and Marcus releases everything. Every complaint, every payoff, every woman who was too scared to speak up. Rachel suddenly bolted from her chair, knocking over her wine glass. Red liquid spread across Nancy's pristine tablecloth like blood. I can't, I can't do this anymore. Tom, she's telling the truth. All of it. The house, the documents, everything. Rachel! Nancy's voice could have cut glass. Remember what we discussed. No, Mom. I'm done lying. Done watching you manipulate everyone. Done watching Dad, she choked on the words, years of silence finally breaking. Tom stood so abruptly his chair crashed backward. Eli, go to your room, buddy. But Daddy. Now, son. I watched my little boy climb the stairs, his shoulders small and confused. When he disappeared, something in me snapped. You all sit here, playing your games, plotting your schemes, while my son, my voice broke. Did you think I wouldn't fight back? That I'd just roll over and let you take everything? We were protecting him, Nancy hissed. From your career obsession, you're selfish. Protecting him? Tom's laugh was hollow. By traumatizing his mother? By lying to me? He turned to George, trembling. The pantry at Christmas. Did you? Oh, please, George sneered. She was asking for it, always prancing around in those business suits. Tom's fist connected with his father's jaw before I could blink. George stumbled back, knocking over a family photo. The glass shattered, and suddenly everyone was shouting. Enough! I screamed, but it was drowned out by Nancy's shrill accusations, Rachel's sobs, Tom and George's struggle. Then a small voice cut through the chaos, Mommy? Eli stood on the stairs, clutching his stuffed dinosaur, tears streaming down his face. In that moment, I saw everything through his eyes, the violence, the hatred, the broken family he'd have to carry forever. I reached for him, but Nancy was faster. She scooped him up, backing away. See what you've done? This is why we needed to protect him. From you. From all of this. My son's frightened eyes met mine over his grandmother's shoulder, and I realized with crushing clarity that in my quest for justice, I'd brought the very chaos I'd fought to protect him from right to his doorstep. Put my son down. My voice cut through the chaos like ice. Now, Nancy. She clutched Eli tighter, backing toward the kitchen. You've done enough damage. Tell them, Rachel. Tell them what we discussed about the custody arrangement. Rachel stood, mascara streaking her cheeks. I forged the papers last week. The custody petition. It's already filed. Tom's head snapped up from where he stood over George. You what? Your father's contacts in family court, Rachel continued, words tumbling out. They promised to fast-track it. Mom said once we had Eli, you'd see reason, Iris would have no choice but to. To what? I stepped forward. To disappear? Like those women from George's company? Is that what you all wanted? Nancy's face twisted. We wanted to save this family from you. Your ambition, your selfishness. My selfishness? The laugh that escaped me didn't sound human. I watched you poison my marriage for years. Watched George's wandering hands, your manipulation, Rachel's jealousy. I endured it all for Tom, for Eli. And you dare call me selfish? Mom, Tom's voice cracked. Give me my son. You're too weak to see what needs to be done, Nancy spat. Just like your father was before I taught him. Taught him what? Rachel suddenly screamed. To be cruel? To hurt people? To make me lie for you, cover up Dad's. His. She grabbed the tablet from the table. I saved everything, Mom. Every email, every document. I couldn't live with it anymore. Nancy's grip on Eli loosened just enough. I lunged forward, snatching my son away as Tom blocked his mother's reach. Eli buried his face in my neck, trembling. "It's over," I said, backing toward the door. "The police have everything. Marcus is probably all ready." Sirens wailed in the distance. George struggled to his feet, blood trickling from his split lip. "Nancy, they can't, the company." "The company?" Tom rounded on his father. "That's what you're worried about? Not the fact that you sexually harassed my wife? That you and Mom tried to steal my son?" The sirens grew closer. Nancy's perfect mask finally shattered completely. "Everything I did was for this family." "No," Rachel whispered. "Everything you did was for control. And I helped you. God help me, I helped you destroy everything." Blue lights flooded the windows. I held Eli tighter, feeling his tears wet my collar. Tom moved to stand beside us, his hand finding mine. "You wanted to protect the family, Mom?" he said quietly. "Well, congratulations. You just lost it." The front door burst open, Marcus leading the charge. As Nancy and George were read their rights, I looked down at my son's tear-stained face and realized that sometimes victory tastes exactly like ashes. I watched the movers load the last box into their truck, each item a piece of my old life being carefully wrapped and labeled. The duplex stood empty now, its windows dark and accusing. Rachel appeared beside me, clutching a manila envelope. "The last of the evidence files. Marcus says the prosecution has everything they need." "Keep them," I said. "Insurance." She nodded, then hesitated. "I started therapy last week. The therapist says." She says I need to understand why I helped Mom destroy everything I claimed to want. I studied her face, seeing for the first time how much she looked like Tom, the same vulnerable eyes. The same capacity for both weakness and strength. "And do you understand?" "Getting there." She touched my arm briefly. "I'm sorry, Iris. For everything." Inside our temporary apartment, Tom sat on the floor with Eli, building a tower of blocks. They looked up as I entered, and for a moment, I saw our whole future balanced as precariously as those wooden blocks. "The papers are ready," Tom said quietly. "Joint custody, just like we discussed." I nodded, watching Eli knock down his tower with a delighted shriek. "Your parents' hearing is next week." "I'm not going." He stood, brushing off his pants. "Rachel will testify." "That's enough." The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, he spoke again. "I should have protected you. Both of you. We should have protected each other." Eli tugged at my sleeve, offering me a block. I sat down beside him, helping him rebuild his tower. Tom watched us for a moment before joining, our hands occasionally brushing as we worked. "Will they come back?" he asked softly. "When they're released?" I placed another block carefully. "Would you let them?" "No." The firmness in his voice surprised us both. "Never again." We built in silence until Eli's tower stood taller than before. As I watched our son circle his creation proudly, I realized something: revenge hadn't tasted like victory or ashes. It had tasted like freedom. "We'll be okay," Tom said, but it sounded more like a question. I looked at the tower we'd built together, imperfect, precarious, but standing. "Not yet," I answered honestly. "But maybe someday." Eli reached for one more block, stretching to place it at the very top. The tower swayed but didn't fall. Sometimes, I thought, the strongest structures are built from the ruins of what came before. I touched the block my son had placed, feeling its solid edges. "Your turn," I said to Tom, and watched to see what he would build.